Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. In the last video, I talked about two different types of games, cognitive, mental games, or action and physical games. In this video, I'm going to give some examples. Now, let's begin with action or physical games. The first one is called Getting to Know You. Well, you ask your students to stand in a circle. You need a beanbag or a ball, but make sure that it is something soft because we don't want to hurt anyone, remember. And the teacher, as the teacher, you start off the game by throwing the ball or the beanbag at someone in the circle and asking a question. The question can be anything that you want your students to practice, such as, what is your name? Do you have a brother or a sister? What's your favorite color? So on. The person who catches the beanbag or the ball must answer the question and then throw it on and ask their own question. It can be a new one or repetition of the same question. This game goes on until everyone gets the ball or the beanbag and asks the question and answer the question at least once. Another game is if do. Now, you need to prepare a set of instructions. The commands that you're going to give, this is a kind of a total physical response activity, should be observable. Now, ask all your students to stand up. That is how you begin. And then you start giving the commands. If your name begins with A, sit down. Wait for the students to do it. If you have blue eyes, sit down. If you have blonde hair, sit down. You can go on like this, and then finally you need to give the last command, which is a kind of a funny, kind of a punchline statement. So you can say, sit down if you have 9 fingers. Now, anyone who has 10 fingers also has 9 fingers. So everyone should sit down. If someone is standing up, then you can find a kind of a punishment, well, not a punishment, but a kind of a funny thing for that specific student. Make sure that there are no disabled students or anyone who's lacking a finger or so in your classroom if you want to play this game. Again, I keep saying this, we don't want to offend anyone, we don't want to hurt the feelings of anyone, so make sure that all of your students are healthy and have 10 fingers if you want to play this, if you want to use this last line. Another game is train writing. Now, you can divide the classroom into 3 groups. Ask the groups to stand in line. One person, one student, standing in the front, facing the board. This student is given a pen and a piece of paper. Now, the last student of this line is given the topic of that lesson. For example, family. As a teacher, you can give a piece of paper where the topic is written on, and they can use that to start the activity. This last student begins writing on the back of the student standing in front of them, letter by letter. If you don't want them to use their fingers, you can ask them to use the end of a pen or a pencil. When the word, when the concept, when the, I don't know, chunk reaches the first person, the leader of the group, they write it on the piece of paper and then paste it on the board. Whoever finishes first and finishes correctly wins the game. And this is a wonderful way of introducing the topic or the theme of that lesson. Another game is yes or no. Now, you need to have enough space in the classroom to play this game. Bring two small balls into the classroom, write yes on one of them and no on the other one. If possible, you can choose different colors so students can easily identify which ball is yes and which ball is no. Divide the class into groups depending on the number of the students that you have. Ask them to stand in line. So when the game begins, only the first person standing in front of each line will get to play. And then they will change roles, okay? We don't want 30, 40 people running in the classroom. So you prepare some yes or no questions based on facts. These should be factual questions. Because if they're opinion questions, you can never say, oh, that's correct, oh, no, that's wrong. So, for example, are there 6 days in a week? Well, then throw the balls. The first student to get the ball which has the correct answer on it gives the answer. Well, you need to use very, very careful language here because remember the other game, having 9 fingers, anyone who has 10 fingers also has 9 fingers. So if you say a week has 6 days, a week has 7 days, so definitely it has 6 days as well. So wording is very important here. So you can say, if they pick yes, that's correct. If you want them to choose no, then change the question as, does the week have only 6 days? Now they need to choose the ball with no on it. So this will involve lots of running and pushing maybe in the classroom. So it can also be played outdoors or in a gym. I will give more examples for outdoor games. Another game is true or false. Prepare 2 flashcards. Write true. These need to be big enough to be seen by all the students in the classroom. Write true on one of them and write false on the other one. And paste or stick these flashcards in different corners, 2 different corners of the classroom, maybe opposite corners, I don't know. And then again, divide the class into groups. These are teams, right? And again, you can ask them to stand in a line. For each word or sentence or the chunk that you will use, only the first student in line will get to play. Hold up a flashcard or a picture or object and say a sentence or a word. For example, show the picture and say, this is an elephant. Or just utter a factual statement like, an elephant has 4 legs. The first student who runs to the correct flashcard and touches gets the point. Okay? And then the student goes back to the back of the line, and the next student gets to play the next word or phrase. Another game, physical game, is flying planes. Now, ask your students to make paper planes. Well, this can be a good art and craft activity. And then collect the planes and write questions on the wings of the planes. Now, if you don't want to waste classroom time for this, what you can do is you can collect the planes and write your questions at home or during the break time. Then you bring all the paper planes back to the classroom and put them on your desk. Call students one by one. Each student will come to the desk, pick up one plane, read the question out loud, and throw the plane. Whoever the plane hits will answer that question. Now remember, the question has to be read beforehand, so everyone will be ready to answer the question. Everyone is now on their tiptoes, waiting whether the plane is going to hit them or not. The student that the plane hits answers the question and then takes the turn. So that person will be the next person to read the question and throw the plane. Another one is birthday lineup. This is excellent if you have just taught, months or days, you're going to ask all your students to stand up and interact, ask and answer, interact with their friends. They should ask, when is your birthday? They don't need to say, when were you born? They just can use a simple question. When is your birthday? Then they should line up according to their birthdays. The line should start with January and in December. And days are also important. So when they're standing in a line, a person who was born on the 10th of January should stand before a person who was born 22nd of January. Okay? When the students say, we're ready, you ask them to say their birth dates, one by one, and check the answers. Well, another game. I think we are all familiar with this one. It is called telephone, or is also known as Chinese whisper. This can be played as a whole class game or in smaller groups. You ask your students to stand up and stand in a circle. Pick up a quite long sentence, not a very long one, but relatively long. Now, make sure that this is a statement or the sentence that you want them to practice. Whisper the sentence in the ear of the first student. This student is going to whisper that sentence in the ear of the next student once. This sentence will go from the first student to the last, and the last one will say the sentence out loud. If the sentences match the original sentence and the sentence that students end up with, that's a good win for the whole class. If not, that's a good laugh. You can laugh all together. Now, as I've mentioned, some of these games can be played outside. If your school has a nice yard, and if the weather is nice, and of course, if the administration is flexible enough, you can take your students out and ask them to play the action games, physical games outside, or you can do the same with a gym, okay? Because gyms are usually huge, spacious areas. Now, the first game, the outdoor game that I have is we're going to prepare some flashcards. Not very big, but not very small. And stick these or paste them on different places in the yard or the gym, okay? You should, I believe, use 15 to 20 flashcards. Then you give the instructions. When you say something, students should run. Try to find the related flashcard and bring it to you. So if you say, for example, bring me a blue t-shirt, okay? Wait. They will run around and find where the blue t-shirt is and pick it up and bring it to you. When they bring the correct item, give them a ticket or a sticker. So at the end of the game, the person who has the most number of tickets or stickers will win the game. This also is great for memory, because when students are running around, they will notice the places of different objects, and the next time when a related question comes, they will directly run to that direction. Another, kind of a similar, kind of a tag game is what is the opposite of? Well, you can adapt it for anything, I believe. Well, we prepare 12 depending on the number of your students that you have, I will just stick to 12 here, 12 pieces of paper with some words on it. Let's assume that I want to practice adjectives. So I will write small, young, and I prepare another set of cards or pieces of paper. This time I will write the opposites of these adjectives. If I have written small, I will write big. If I have written young, I will write old. Okay? Now, I will choose 12 students and pin or stick these adjectives, the original ones, I mean, on the back of these students. And then give the opposites to the other 12 students. Now, the students with adjectives on their back are going to run. Students who are holding the opposites will try to catch these people. If they catch the right opposite, they stand together and wait for the others to finish. Okay, whoever finishes first and correctly will win the game. You can also use music for this activity. You can start the music and stop the music and say, well, whoever has caught the right opposite is the winner. You know, that kind of game adaptation is also possible. Now, we can talk about some examples of cognitive games. Now, the first example that I'm going to use is a connect the dots activity. As you can see in this example, you can use numbers or scrambled letters for a connect the dots activity. If the students connect the dots in the correct order, they can find the hidden sentence. Another game is called Odd One Out. Now, as a teacher, you prepare groups of words, concepts that share a common feature a common property, but one of them should be the odd one out, which should not fit into that category. Well, you can use 4 or 5 words in a group. For example, you can ask your students to find the odd one out in the group 16, 42, 27, 8, and 32. The odd one out is 27 because all the others are even numbers. You can have categories like an ant, a cockroach, a spider, a beetle, and asked to find the odd one out, they should circle the spider because the spider is not an insect, the others are insects. Depending on their schemata, whatever they have studied before, whatever knowledge they or experience they have, depending on whatever they have studied before, can be used in these categories. You can also use linguistic features as category titles. For example, you can use an apple, an orange, an umbrella, a book. Well, normally, these do not belong to any group. Well, an apple and an orange can be categorized as fruit, but the others can't. But they can say, we say an apple, an orange, an umbrella, but a book. So, see, without saying anything about the phonetic formation of the indefinite article, you can ask them to spot the odd one out. Well, another game that you can use is a crossword puzzle. Well, crossword puzzles, of course, suitable for young learners. With crossword puzzles, as you see in the example, you can use visuals to help students because sometimes the definition of a word is much more difficult than the word itself. So visuals are wonderful clues for students to do this puzzle. And you can also hide a keyword there and ask them to find the keyword. Word hunt is also a great game, cognitive game, and word hunts help students improve their reading speed. Well, you can prepare word hunts yourself, or you can find ready-made ones. Now, as you see in the example, I have a ready-made one, which is related to school words. Another game that I can suggest here as a cognitive or a mental game is one at a time. This is a great activity for word creation. Now, you give an example first, of course. You say, change dog, the word dog, into cat, changing one letter at a time. You can do it on the board to show the steps of this transition. So start with dog and then change the last letter into T. So it will become a dot. And then change the first letter into C. Now you have a cot. And then change the middle letter O into an A. Now you have a cat. Okay? Now it's your turn. Change pig into hen. Make sure that the words that you create are real words. Do not make up words that do not exist in English, okay? Now, please note that there may be different ways of coming up with the correct answer in these puzzles. So do not try to force students to do whatever you want them to do. Let them do what they can do, okay? Another example is change bat to fox. Okay, you can come up with well, short words like this and ask your students to do them. Another game is find the difference. As you can see in the example, you have two pictures which look similar, but they are not identical. There are certain differences. In this one, we have 7 differences. Ask your students to find the 7 differences, but they need to make full sentences. So, for example, they need to write, there is a lamp on the wall in the first picture, but there is no lamp in the second picture. That kind of thing. Another game can be a categorization game. You can find visuals of a group of objects or concepts or animals or people, whatever, that share a feature. Okay? And then ask your students to find the ones that share that feature. For example, you give this set of animals and say, circle the animals with 4 feet. When they are done, you can start asking questions like, how many feet does a deer have? Okay, 4. So circle that. How many feet does a fish have? Oh, no feet. Okay, don't circle it. So it is a nice way of asking and answering the questions while checking the answers. Another cognitive game can be scrambled letters. Choose the topic of that lesson or the theme of that lesson. Scramble the letters and write the scrambled letters on the board or reflect on the smartboard, and ask your students to work in small groups and make as many words as they can. Whoever can come up with the longest word and let's say more number of words will win the game. If you look at the example here, okay, you can see that if they can come up with the longest word, they can also come up with the topic or theme of that lesson, which is transportation. Well, a similar but a different game is put the words into the correct alphabetical order. Usually I use a wheel for that. It makes it more memorable or easier to recognize different words. You choose certain vocabulary items from that lesson, from the topic of the lesson, place them, scatter them in the wheel, and then time the activity and say, put these words into their correct alphabetical order. You have 1 minute, and make it a kind of challenging game, okay? As you can see here in this wheel, I have cough, toothache, flu, backache, sneeze, cold, headache, and fever. In 1 minute, I asked them to put all these words into their correct alphabetical order, and then I say, okay, can you guess the topic of this lesson? They should be able to say health, because these are all, or health problems, that kind of thing, because these are all related to health. The last game that I'm going to give as an example is called Vanishing Cards. Now, you need 2 sets of cards here. One with pictures, one with words. Now, imagine that I have just recently, let's say, taught professions or jobs. So I may use this Vanishing Cards game to practice. I have these flashcards. I stick them or paste them on the board. And then in the first part of the game, I ask my students to match the words as a separate set of flashcards to the pictures and the pictures. Okay, so that can be done in groups, I don't know, or that can be done as a whole class activity. When it is done, when they have matched, for example, the first picture as a doctor, and the second one as a firefighter, okay, and the third one as the dentist, leave the words on the pictures. Now in the second part, just a quick reminder, please look at the pictures I try to use. I try to avoid gender-biased language or pictures in my classes, okay? So I have a female doctor, I have a female dentist, well, whatever. In the second part of the game, you remove the cards with the words one by one. So this will happen. And you will ask, who is missing with the first one? With the second one, you can move on to who are missing. So it is a wonderful vocabulary repetition game, and it also tests memory. This is not parrot-like repetition. It is not boring. It is a game, so it is fun. They will keep saying the firefighter is missing, that kind of thing. In the last, with the last card, most probably they will have uttered firefighter at least 10 times. Well, that's all for this video. You can come up with hundreds and thousands of games that you can use in the classroom. But I had to choose only some examples for this video. Please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more videos. Take care. Bye.